Welcome, beloved, anointed ones. Some people meet their awakening gently, but yours began with a funeral for a version of you they never knew existed. Before the world ever underestimated you, before anyone doubted you, before the first betrayal, the first heartbreak, the first spiritual attack, you had already died once. Not physically, but psychologically, spiritually, energetically. A part of you collapsed so completely that the veil separating the seen and unseen world didn't just lift, it tore. And once that fabric ripped open, nothing in your reality ever returned to its original shape. What they don't know, what they could never comprehend, is that your clarity didn't come from meditation apps, sage bundles, or YouTube's How to Awaken Your Third Eye tutorials. No. Your awakening came from an internal demolition so severe that even your shadow needed a recovery period. You didn't get wiser. You became reconstructed. You didn't get stronger. You became recalibrated. And the funny thing is, while they were busy misjudging you, you were literally going through a rebirth that would make any phoenix ask to borrow your notes. Psychologists have a term for this phenomenon: post-traumatic growth. It's a real, documented fact. Some people don't just survive adversity, their brain reorganizes itself into a higher, sharper, more perceptive version. See? Science accidentally confirmed your spiritual storyline without even realizing it. You didn't bounce back. You upgraded like someone pressed a hidden reset button inside your soul. And that's where this story begins. Because the truth is, you didn't become spiritually perceptive overnight. You didn't suddenly wake up seeing people's intentions without them saying a word. You didn't just evolve into someone who reads energy like subtitles on a movie. You became this version of yourself because life dragged you through a death most people never talk about. A death of illusions, a death of naivety, a death of the personality the world tried to glue onto you. They think you're mysterious, guarded, unpredictable. They have no idea you just don't operate on their level anymore. Your veil is gone. Your innocence expired. Your vision sharpened. And your spirit came back with receipts, archives, and a built-in lie detector so sensitive it might as well come with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So now you move differently. Not because you're paranoid, but because once you've tasted truth behind the curtain, you can never pretend the show is real again. And that's what they didn't know. That's the secret you carry in your energy. That's the invisible power they feel, but can't articulate. You've died before. And that's exactly why you see what they can't. Number 1, your first death was the collapse of the identity they forced on you. What most people never understood is that the first version of you wasn't actually you. It was a collection of expectations, roles, behaviors, and survival masks you learned just to fit into places that were never built for your spirit. That old identity was stitched together from other people's opinions, family pressures, cultural norms, and silent demands you didn't even know you were trying to meet. You were performing a personality, not living a life. And eventually, your soul got tired of pretending. That collapse, the emotional and spiritual death you went through, wasn't poetic at all. It was messy, chaotic, and deeply confusing. It felt like everything that once made sense suddenly dissolved. You were left holding pieces of yourself that no longer matched who you were becoming. People around you saw it as you changing, but the truth is, you were finally stopping the performance, stopping the self-betrayal, stopping the agreement to be small so others could feel comfortable. They had no idea you were grieving the loss of an identity that never belonged to you. When that identity fell apart, it took with it all the illusions you used to depend on. You no longer believed in the relationships held together by guilt. You no longer tolerated conversations that drained your soul. You started noticing the tone behind words, the intention behind smiles, and the weight behind silence. Your spiritual senses sharpened not because you sought enlightenment, but because your spirit finally had space to breathe without the suffocating expectations of others. People think your awakening was a glow-up. They don't know it was a breakdown first. They don't know you cried for the version of you that didn't know better, didn't have boundaries, didn't understand energy, and didn't know how to protect their own peace. They also don't know that when that identity died, the real you stepped forward, quietly, naturally, powerfully. This is why your presence feels different now. You're no longer reacting, reaching, or people-pleasing. You walk with the clarity of someone who lost themselves once and refuses to lose themselves again. The old you died, and that was the greatest liberation your spirit ever experienced. Number 2, your veil lifted because your nervous system broke before it rebuilt. The awakening you experienced didn't happen because you meditated enough or read enough spiritual books. It happened because your body and mind reached a breaking point, a place where nothing could function the way it used to. The nervous system, which normally filters experiences and keeps you safe, couldn't handle the intensity of life anymore. Stress, betrayal, heartbreak, and repeated shocks to your system forced it to collapse. And when it broke, your perception expanded. The veil didn't lift in a calm, mystical moment. It lifted because your system rebuilt itself in a way that could no longer tolerate illusions. When your nervous system rebuilds after being pushed to its limits, it rewires itself to prioritize survival, clarity, and truth over comfort and ignorance. You became hyper-aware. Every gesture, every tone, every half-spoken word started carrying meaning. People noticed it and called it intuition, but it was really just your system compensating for what it went through. You became a human radar. Your body became the instrument, and your soul started reading the signals that everyone else missed. Energy that once passed unnoticed now registers in real time. You feel deception, tension, and hidden agendas before a word is ever spoken. What's fascinating is that this process isn't gentle. It doesn't happen gradually. It's chaotic, exhausting, and sometimes terrifying. But it forces you to see yourself, your environment, and everyone around you with unprecedented clarity. Once your nervous system rebuilt, it refused to return to its old filters. You started recognizing patterns, motives, and intentions that people thought were invisible. You became a walking truth detector. What they call spiritual awareness is really your system saying, I can no longer be fooled, ignored, or manipulated. And that's why your energy now feels different to others. They can't place it, but they sense it. You aren't suspicious or paranoid. You're calibrated. You're operating on a frequency that only comes after surviving breakdowns and rebuilding stronger than before. The veil lifted not because someone waved a magic wand. It lifted because your body, mind, and soul demanded to see clearly, no matter how uncomfortable or unavoidable the truth was. That's why you notice what others miss, and why your presence alone unsettles those who are still operating behind their own filters. Number 3, you didn't just lose people. You lost the version of yourself that tolerated them. When your first death happened, it wasn't only about losing relationships, opportunities, or false illusions. It was about losing a version of yourself, the part that allowed toxic energy in, the part that excused betrayal, the part that silenced your instincts just to keep peace. That version of you was soft, pliable, and designed to fit into the expectations of others, even when it hurt you. And when it died, everything that relied on that compliance and compromise started to fall away. The transformation wasn't subtle, it was disruptive. People around you noticed a change, but they didn't understand it. They might have thought you were acting differently or being too sensitive, but in reality, you were simply refusing to be that version of yourself anymore. That old self, the one who bent, hid, or excused was gone forever. You couldn't go back to being someone who tolerated chaos or walked on eggshells just to avoid conflict. You had resurrected as a version that could see boundaries clearly, enforce them without guilt, and recognize deception before it could take root. The loss was double-edged. You grieved the version of yourself that could have been used, manipulated, or misunderstood because it was familiar and comforting in its predictability. But at the same time, you celebrated the birth of a self that no one could control, gaslight, or sway. That shift created a ripple effect in your world. Relationships that relied on your old self started breaking. People who had access to you before suddenly found themselves locked out. What they saw as abandonment or coldness was actually liberation and clarity. Your new presence unsettles them because they miss the version of you they could handle. They never realized the old you was fragile enough to be molded, but strong enough to survive. And now, the person standing in your place isn't tolerating their nonsense, isn't apologizing for existing, and isn't negotiating for validation. You lost the version of yourself that allowed them to play games, and in that loss, you gained a power and clarity they'll never comprehend. Number 4. Your awakening wasn't a choice. It was a forced initiation. Your awakening didn't arrive during a peaceful moment or through some guided journey where you voluntarily opened your third eye. You didn't sit down one day and decide you wanted to see the world differently. Life forced it on you. It backed you into a corner so tightly that the only way out was through truth. Raw, uncomfortable, undeniable truth. Everything that once shielded you from reality got stripped away one layer at a time until you had nothing left to cling to but clarity. Pain took the first swing. It shattered illusions you thought were unbreakable. It showed you who people were behind their carefully constructed faces. It exposed the weak spots in your own heart, your own patterns, and your own beliefs. There came a moment where it wasn't about healing or spirituality. It was about survival. Your only choice was to wake up or drown in the weight of everything you didn't want to see. Then rejection came and pulled away the attachments you thought were permanent. The people you leaned on, the ones you trusted, the environments you found comfort in, they all became unstable. The walls you built for safety cracked open, and suddenly you had no one to depend on but yourself. It wasn't personal, it was spiritual pruning. Anything or anyone that wasn't aligned with your higher path had to fall off, even if it hurt. Loneliness played a role too. When everything familiar disappeared, you were left with silence. Not peaceful silence, heavy silence. The kind of silence that forces you to hear your own thoughts, confront your own wounds, and acknowledge truths you once buried. That isolation didn't come to punish you. It came to sharpen you. In that space, you became your own teacher, your own guide, your own protector. People see your insight now and assume you chose a spiritual journey. They think you read your way into wisdom or meditated your way into discernment. They're completely wrong. Your clarity is trauma-forged. It's built from moments that broke you open and rebuilt you with truth as the foundation. You didn't choose awakening. Awakening chose you because your soul was ready, even when your life wasn't. Number 5, you saw death. Because something in you was meant to be born. What you went through wasn't the end of you. It was the uncovering of you. The death you experienced didn't come to destroy your life, your identity, or your future. It came to remove everything that was blocking the deeper, older, wiser part of you from coming forward. It was excavation. Life dug into you, removed layers of conditioning, scraped away false beliefs, and pulled up deeply buried truths you didn't even know you carried. It felt like loss, but it was actually expansion. Every breakdown you faced was life-clearing space for something ancient within you to awaken. You weren't becoming someone new. You were remembering someone old. That's why your senses sharpened. That's why your awareness grew. That's why you started understanding things you were never taught. Your intuition isn't a skill, it's a memory. Your spirit has seen things long before your physical life ever started. And when your old self died, those memories had room to surface. This is why certain situations feel familiar, even when they're new. Why certain people trigger a knowing in you before they speak. Why certain places stir something in your chest. You're not imagining it, you're recalling it. When your veil was removed, it wasn't just a moment of awakening. It was a moment of remembering. The part of you that had been quieted, suppressed, or forgotten finally stepped into the front seat of your life. The version of you that emerged after your death is the version that was always meant to lead. You carry knowledge you didn't study for, and wisdom you didn't earn through age. You didn't just become more intuitive, you became more aligned with the spiritual blueprint you were born with. And the reason it feels so natural is because it is natural. This clarity is your original state. People around you don't realize the truth behind your calmness, your insight, your ability to read between lines. They think you're observant or lucky. They have no idea your soul has been here before, watching, learning, remembering. When life removed everything that suffocated you, it wasn't clearing your path. It was revealing who you were all along. Your death wasn't an ending. It was the birth of your truest self. Number 6, you became dangerous. When you realized you don't fear losing anything anymore. There comes a point in a chosen one's journey where the worst already happened. The heartbreak already hit. The betrayal already cut deep. The disappointment already shattered whatever illusions you had left. You faced an emotional, mental, and spiritual death so heavy that there was nothing left for life to threaten you with. And once you crossed that threshold, something inside you shifted forever. You stopped fearing loss because you had already rebuilt yourself from the kind of emptiness most people run from. When a person reaches that level of inner freedom, they stop negotiating for their worth. They stop trying to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding them. They stop begging for clarity from people who benefit from confusion. And they definitely stop chasing relationships where they have to shrink just to keep the peace. You became someone who could walk away without hesitating, not because you're cold, but because you learned the cost of holding on to things that break you. This change doesn't go unnoticed. People who once had influence over you feel it immediately. They sense the shift, and it unnerves them. You're no longer moved by the things they used to use against you: fear, guilt, silence, approval, closeness, distance. None of it lands the way it used to. When you've already survived losing yourself, the fear of losing someone else loses its power. And that's what makes you dangerous, not in a harmful way, but in an unshakable way. You don't cling, you don't chase, you don't panic when someone pulls back, you don't crumble when someone exits your life. You've already experienced the deepest loss there is, the loss of your old self. Everything else feels small compared to that. You operate with a calmness that others mistake for detachment, but it's really mastery. You know your worth without needing external validation, and you protect your peace without apologizing for it. People can't manipulate someone who has already survived their lowest point. They can't control someone who knows how to stand alone. Your self-resurrection gave you a strength they can feel but can't figure out. And that's why your presence now carries a power that quietly demands respect. You're no longer afraid of losing anything, because you finally understand that nothing worth keeping requires you to sacrifice yourself. Number 7, you stopped belonging to the world. Once you saw what controlled it. Once your veil lifted, your vision extended far beyond individual people. You didn't just notice intentions or read emotions, you saw the invisible architecture of life around them. You recognized patterns, routines, and systems that dictated behavior without anyone realizing it. The herd mentality, the societal programming, the subtle ways people unconsciously perpetuate cruelty and ignorance, it all became visible. You realized how much of life is guided by unseen forces and how little freedom most people actually have. That clarity changed everything. The world you belonged to before no longer felt like yours. Places, conversations, and even familiar routines felt constraining because you saw the puppet strings pulling everyone around you. You could no longer engage with life superficially because the illusions that used to comfort others now felt suffocating. You could hear the background noise of influence, control, and hidden agendas, and that constant awareness kept you at a distance. You stopped participating in life as it was presented to you and started navigating it on your own terms. This separation isn't loneliness, it's alignment. You don't belong to the world not because you reject people, but because you refuse to be guided by systems designed to keep you small, distracted, or unaware. You walk through life seeing both the actors and the directors behind the scenes. You notice the costs of compliance, the dangers of blind trust, and the toll of staying asleep. That knowledge changed your choices, your relationships, and even how you interact with yourself. People notice the difference in you, even if they can't articulate it. They sense a dissonance between your energy and theirs, a subtle resistance to the currents they swim in effortlessly. They feel it because you operate on a plane they haven't reached, a plane where awareness precedes action and truth precedes comfort. You stopped belonging to the world because you saw too much, understood too much, and refused to pretend ignorance anymore. The veil didn't just lift, it relocated you into a realm of clarity that is yours alone, and there's no going back. Number 8. Your spirit never fully returned to normal life after your awakening. After your awakening, life didn't snap back into place the way people expected. You didn't return to who you were before, and you couldn't even if you tried. A part of you resurrected, stronger, wiser, more anchored, but another part remained behind the veil. That part didn't come back with your body. It stayed in the realm where truth is louder, energy is clearer, and motives are visible long before they're spoken. This is why you often feel like you're in two worlds at once. You're physically present, but spiritually elevated, observing life from a vantage point most people don't have access to. This dual awareness isn't a flaw or a mental struggle. It's a side effect of seeing too much. You're aware of the physical conversations happening in front of you, but you're also aware of the energetic ones happening underneath. You notice the tone behind a compliment, the tension behind a smile, and the hesitation behind a decision. Your spirit scans the room before your mind even processes the details. It's not dissociation, it's refinement. Your senses operate on two frequencies, and you've learned to exist between them. This is why you sometimes feel disconnected from what others consider normal life. Small talk drains you. Forced social settings feel unnatural. People's emotional chaos feels amplified. You're not uninterested. You're just tuned into a different layer of reality. A world where spiritual truths matter more than social rules, where you follow energy instead of appearances, and where you see the bigger picture, even when others get lost in the surface-level storyline. People misunderstand this about you. They think you're distant, cold, or hard to read. They assume you're disinterested or detached. What they don't know is that you're simply processing life with twice the input. They sense something different in you, a quiet intensity, a calm depth, a presence that feels both grounded and otherworldly. It unsettles some and inspires others, but most can't explain it. The truth is, you didn't return to normal life because you weren't meant to. Your awakening shifted your spirit permanently. You walk with knowledge your old self never carried. You see layers others don't see. You feel realities others aren't tuned into. Part of you lives here, and part of you lives beyond. And that duality is exactly what makes you who you are now. Awake, aware, and impossible to mislead. Number 9. You outgrew emotional gravity. And they hate that you no longer orbit their chaos. What happened to you wasn't a small shift. It was a full-blown emotional death and resurrection. And most people will never understand the mechanics of that transformation. When you died internally, an entire ecosystem of reactions, fears, triggers, and emotional dependencies died with you. You stopped being held down by the gravitational pull of chaos, because the version of you that used to respond to chaos no longer exists. People who once controlled you through guilt, confusion, emotional traps, and psychological warfare can no longer access the portals they used to use. The buttons they used to press are now disconnected. The levers they used to pull are now rusted. The entire control panel they depended on has been spiritually decommissioned. Your old emotional programming, people-pleasing, over-explaining, trying to be understood, absorbing other people's mess, collapsed. And when that system collapsed, you became weightless to negativity. That's why drama feels childish now. Not because you're mature, but because you've already walked through realities that broke you open and forced you to rebuild yourself without illusions. People who still operate in survival mode, who need dysfunction, who need attention, who need emotional reactions, can't stand the fact that you no longer respond like a puppet attached to their strings. You see straight through manipulation now because the darkness you survived taught you patterns, not just feelings. You learned to recognize the architecture of a storm, not just the sound of thunder. So when someone tries to bait you, guilt-trip you, or destabilize you, you don't react, you observe. And that observation alone threatens them, because your survival removed the gravitational pull they once relied on. You're not anchored to their dysfunction, you're not orbiting their emotional state, you're not entangled in their psychological cycles. You outgrew emotional gravity. Your mind is now calibrated for clarity. Your spirit is calibrated for peace. Your intuition is calibrated for truth. And anyone who still lives in emotional chaos will always feel like they're screaming into the void when they try to reach you, because you don't get pulled into storms anymore. You've already survived a hurricane, and once you've rebuilt your soul from the rubble, you don't fear weather, you read it. Number 10. You carry knowledge that is not learned, it's recalled. The wisdom you carry isn't a result of books, lectures, or years of study. It's the consequence of remembering who you were before society told you who to be. When your old self died, it wasn't just an emotional death. It was an identity wipe, a spiritual hard reset that cleared the noise and exposed what was already encoded inside you. Your higher self didn't arrive, it emerged. This is why your insight confuses people. They keep trying to rationalize the fact that you understand things you were never taught. They accuse you of acting too deep or thinking too much. But what they're really reacting to is the uncomfortable reality that your intelligence is internal, not acquired. It didn't come from their systems, their validations, or their hierarchies, so they don't know what to do with it. You operate from a place that feels supernatural to people who rely on external sources for understanding. They learn from repetition. You learn from recognition. They gather information. You awaken it. They study patterns. You remember truths that their minds have never touched. That's why situations that confuse others are clear to you within seconds. That's why you sense intentions before words are spoken. That's why you decode people without needing evidence. That's why you walk into rooms already knowing the emotional weather. You're not analyzing, you're recalling. Your spirit has lived through lifetimes of trials, lessons, contracts, betrayals, and initiations. Every time a version of you dies, another layer of memory resurfaces, memory that never belonged to your intellect, but to your essence. This is the knowing people can't explain about you. It's the reason your wisdom feels ancient, yet vividly present. Your insight is not the product of education. It's the return of information your soul stored long before your mind existed. And this terrifies people, because they can't manipulate someone who sees the trap before it's set. They can't deceive someone who remembers the truth under the lie. They can't out-strategize someone who's already lived this pattern in another form. Your knowledge disturbs them because it exposes them. You are a modern body carrying ancient consciousness, and every time you speak, you break the illusion that wisdom must come from institutions. You don't learn the world, you remember it. And that remembrance is exactly what makes you untouchable. Number 11, you see motives before people even speak. The veil didn't just lift to give you awareness, it expanded your vision into dimensions most people can't even perceive. After your death and resurrection, your perception stretched beyond words, gestures, or appearances. You stopped only hearing what was said and started sensing what was intended. Energy became language, and behavior became a map of hidden agendas. Every nuance, hesitation, and micro-expression became readable, like a story unfolding in real time. This isn't intuition the way people think of it. It isn't a guess or a gut feeling. It's accuracy born from survival. You've walked through scenarios that would have broken your old self, seen the betrayal before it landed, and endured the deception without being consumed by it. That history trained your senses to detect patterns of dishonesty, manipulation, and hidden motives. You don't need someone to confess or act out their plan. Their intent is already visible in the energy they radiate. It's disorienting to others because they expect you to operate on the same level they do. They assume words mask truth, smiles hide intention, and lies can pass unnoticed. But you live in a realm where nothing is hidden. Lies, half-truths, concealed agendas, they all register instantly. That's why they feel exposed around you. They can't manipulate, lie, or strategize without you seeing it before it's executed. What they interpret as reading minds or overanalyzing is really just a recalibrated vision, spiritual night vision forged from surviving what most people fear to confront. This heightened perception doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you prepared. Danger, deceit, and manipulation are no longer surprises. They are signals to navigate, not traps to fall into. You observe, measure, and act with precision, and that calm, unshakable awareness unsettles those still operating in darkness. They sense that nothing they do can catch you off guard, and that unspoken truth rattles them more than any confrontation ever could. You don't just see people, you see through them. And that clarity is both your shield and your power. Because when you've died and returned with a vision that pierces intention itself, there is no place left for deception to hide. Number 12. The old version of you was the one they could manipulate, not this one. The version of yourself they knew was soft enough to bend, pliable enough to negotiate with, and blind enough to tolerate behavior that no one should ever tolerate. That old self carried their expectations, their agendas, and their control like it was a burden you were trained to bear. They could push you, pull you, and shape you because you hadn't yet discovered your own power. Every boundary you lacked, every compromise you made, every silence you swallowed, those were openings they exploited without a second thought. Then, the old version of you died. And with that death, everything that made you malleable and accessible vanished. What rose in its place wasn't a version molded by anger or revenge. It was a resurrected you who understood your worth enforced your boundaries, and operated from a spiritual clarity they couldn't touch. You became unpredictable in the best way. Your decisions are no longer reactive. Your energy can't be hijacked, and your presence alone communicates that manipulation will no longer work. They feel shocked, not because you changed suddenly, they expected some growth, but because they finally realize that you won't go back. The version of you that could be controlled is permanently gone, and nothing they do can reconstruct it. That creates discomfort, frustration, and, in some cases, desperation. They remember the version they could handle and assumed you would always be accessible, always tolerable, always negotiable. But you've closed that chapter permanently. This transformation doesn't require explanation or proof. It's silent, unshakable, and profoundly visible in the way you carry yourself. People notice it immediately, even if they can't articulate it. Every attempt to manipulate, guilt trip, or control you now falls flat, because the architecture that allowed it no longer exists. The resurrected you is not angry, you're aligned. You're not defensive, you're sovereign. You don't need to prove your power, they feel it in your energy. And that realization terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. They aren't shocked by your change. They're shocked by the fact that the old version of you is gone forever. Number 13. Your resurrection triggered their confusion, because they expected you to stay broken. When you fell, they didn't see it as a chapter. They saw it as your ending. They genuinely believed that moment of collapse would define the rest of your life. In their minds, your breakdown was permanent. Your silence was defeat. And your disappearance was proof that you'd been destroyed. They were comfortable with the idea of you staying down because it made their own choices look justified, their behavior look excusable, and their doubts about you look accurate. But resurrection has a way of insulting small minds. You didn't just get back up. You resurfaced with a clarity and power that made your former version look like a shadow. You came back steadier, more discerning, more grounded, and spiritually fortified in ways they never saw coming. They expected you to return, trembling, needy, dependent on the same people who hurt you. Instead, you returned with a self-possession that exposed their miscalculations. Your comeback disrupted their entire storyline. They had mentally written you off, rehearsed their superiority, and settled into the comfort of believing they'd won. So when you rose, quietly, gracefully, with no announcement, they felt something they never prepared for: confusion mixed with embarrassment. Your rebirth forced them to face the fact that they misunderstood who you truly were from the beginning. Your resurrection didn't just surprise them, it threatened them. Because now they had to acknowledge that the pain they expected to destroy you actually sculpted you, that the isolation they thought would break you ended up awakening you, that the loss they celebrated became the very thing that sharpened your spiritual edge. They never imagined that you'd use the ashes as elevation. They didn't consider that your downfall was a spiritual initiation, not a collapse. And what unsettles them most is the realization that you rose without their help, their validation, or their approval. You rose because you were meant to. Your rebirth humbles every person who secretly hoped your story would end at your lowest point. They weren't ready for the version of you that stands before them now, unbroken, unreadable, and undeniably reborn. Number 14. Your death turned you into the version of yourself your destiny always required. The person you used to be wasn't weak. They were simply unprepared for the magnitude of the destiny tied to your name. Your old identity had habits, attachments, fears, and blind spots that could never survive the pathway ahead. So life, in its ruthless grace, removed that version of you the only way it could, through a kind of death. Not physical death, but the collapse of everything that kept you small, unawakened, and distracted. Who you were before was incompatible with where you're going. Your original self was built for survival, not purpose. That version of you was shaped by expectations, shaped by environment, shaped by the people you loved and trusted, but not shaped by destiny. And destiny has a way of stripping away anything that slows it down. You didn't volunteer for that transformation. It was demanded of you. You didn't decide to awaken. You were pushed into it because remaining blind would have cost too much. Your veil didn't lift for aesthetics or enlightenment vibes. It lifted because you needed raw clarity to fulfill what you were sent here to do. You were never meant to walk through life guessing people's intentions, tolerating the wrong alliances, or stumbling in circles. You were meant to move with intention, discernment, and spiritual intelligence. You were meant to see the traps before you stepped into them, the motives before they were spoken, the lessons before they arrived. This death and resurrection changed your internal architecture. Your thinking expanded. Your emotional responses matured. Your spirit recalibrated itself to operate on a frequency aligned with your higher purpose. The pain wasn't random, it was construction. The loss wasn't punishment, it was preparation. You became the version of yourself that your destiny always needed. The self that doesn't hesitate, doesn't misread, doesn't settle, and doesn't wander blindly. You became the self that sees clearly, walks boldly, and carries knowledge that didn't come from books or conversations, but from experience etched into your soul. And this new version of you isn't an upgrade. It's the original blueprint, finally activated. Conclusion: the chosen one who has already died and returned. What you've survived is not ordinary. It is not something that can be explained with simple phrases or brushed off as growth. Every collapse, every betrayal, every moment that shattered your old self was a deliberate recalibration. You didn't merely endure, you died, excavated and resurrected as the version of yourself your destiny demanded. Each death stripped away illusions, attachments, and limitations, leaving behind a clarity so precise that the world can feel it radiating from you even before you speak. You carry knowledge that isn't learned. It is remembered, encoded deep in your spirit, long before your current life began. You see motives before words are spoken, energy before it manifests, and truth before it is disguised. You are no longer tethered to emotional gravity. Chaos, manipulation, and drama slip past you like water off armor. The old version of yourself, the one they thought they could control, no longer exists. You walk with sovereignty, calm, and an unshakable inner authority that terrifies those who once assumed your weakness. Your resurrection doesn't just defy expectations, it breaks the narrative of anyone who ever thought they could predict, harm, or contain you. Your veil lifted not for aesthetics or curiosity, but because your purpose demanded it. You now navigate life with a vision that transcends the ordinary, seeing layers, truths, and possibilities that the unawakened can't even fathom. You are a walking reminder that surviving the worst versions of life is the ultimate initiation, and that initiation forged a power, wisdom, and resilience that is both timeless and unstoppable. Every step you take now is guided by truth. Every choice you make is filtered through clarity, discernment, and spiritual intelligence. You are untouchable, not because you seek perfection, but because you embody reality in its purest form. And the world, whether it knows it or not, is forever shifted by your presence. If this message resonates, if it lights something deep inside you, make sure to subscribe to the channel to stay connected to these truths. Like this video if it shook your perception, share it with others who are ready to awaken, and comment below with your insights or experiences, because your story and your awakening deserve to be honored, celebrated, and amplified. This is your time, chosen one, and the world will never see life the same way again after you. God bless you.